My name is Bonnie B, and you are watching The Power of Perseverance. So Dr. Michael Wool is speaking with us today, and we're going into the topic of caffeine and how a lot of people, they've got these energy drinks and they're comparing, caffeine to BHB, and it's not the same thing. And so why do you think people take on the perception that an energy drink is providing energy?
Yes, I think there's quite a bit of distinction to be elaborated on right now about the difference between an quote energy drink and caffeine. Okay, many energy drinks have caffeine in it. Okay, but that's actually a stimulant, and caffeine, it belongs to a class of drugs called the alkaloids. And what happens is it increases neurotransmitter. So that means that the release of acetylcholine, which is stimulated by caffeine, causes the neuron to be stimulated, but it's actually not more energy. All it's doing is it's causing the signal to be, let's say, it's difficult to say this, but it's amplified, okay? Now, that's very different from a molecule like beta hydroxybutyrate ketone, okay? Ketones, as in our exogenous ketones, which are actually real energy because your body uses either sugar or uses ketones and generates real energy, the coin of energy called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So when you compare sugar as an energy source and ketones as an energy source, you get 40% more energy, real energy, 40% more ATP than you get from sugar. So many of these energy drinks are based on sugar. In fact, very popular ones have almost 40 grams of sugar, which causes a whole host of other problems. But and that might produce some energy, but not as much energy as you get from BHB.
And clean energy.
And clean energy. And very different from caffeine, which is a stimulant, but not really giving you real energy.
So let's put into perspective what the two different sources do. So we'll start with caffeine. I ingest it into my body and it goes in and it has just stimulated these neurons, which, in simplified, it's telling me that I'm not tired when in fact my body probably is really exhausted.
That's right. So when you take these stimulants, okay, it releases acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with caffeine ingestion. And it may stimulate the neuron, but after a while, the acetylcholine gets exhausted. So you get a caffeine crash. That is, no further addition of caffeine will result in any further stimulation because the acetylcholine supply is depleted. So people will tell you, oh yeah, I didn't get any more buzz. You start getting the side effects of caffeine, which include fast heart rate, anxiety provocation, all kinds of other elevated blood pressure and a sense of flight. I mean, people even you can get caffeine paranoia and all sorts of other things in very high doses. And that's another important point to bring up is that, caffeine itself has a very different characteristic in the sense that there is a trough or a sweet spot where you want to keep the caffeine level. If you go over it, you get side effects. If you get under it, you don't get enough side effects. That's completely different than BHB, where BHB is a real energy molecule. It actually provides increased levels of ATP, which caffeine does not do. And you can't exhaust it. In other words, long distance runners because they have fat deposits, get endless and boundless energy. And marathon runners now depend on the production of high levels of ketones to sustain energy in the body.
All right, so I'm going to take exogenous ketones, whether it be through a ready to drink, a powdered stick pack I carry with me, or capsules. And the second it gets into my body, what's the process of it getting past that blood brain barrier? And as I like to say it for, a simplified way is I feel like it's connecting these neurons and it's turning these lights on.
That's right. So, what's very important to understand how the brain uses energy sources. Okay, so we're off caffeine now. We're just talking about brain energy. When you're talking about sugar, sugar requires insulin. It's like a magic garage door opener. And you can't get sugar into the mitochondria to produce ATP unless you have the presence of insulin. But because the molecule of ketone is a one carbon molecule, it traverses into the brain seamlessly. It does not require the magic garage door opener of insulin. So the blood concentration that you can measure of BHB in the blood is identical to the amount that you could measure if you did a spinal tap and looked at it. But if you did the same thing with sugar and you did a blood concentration, it might be 100, but the concentration of sugar in the spinal fluid is typically lower because of blood-brain barrier, and especially molecules that are larger have a hard time getting into the blood-brain barrier space, which houses your spinal cord and your brain.
So would you say BHB, once it's in their cellular, making those connections, it's affecting the hippocampus and your vagus nerve, and it's putting a connection between that right and that left brain, would you say?
Yes, and in fact, there have been a number of elegant studies that look at this. Most recently, probably in the last few months, been documentation that the utilization of sugar in the brain declines with age, and may be one of the perturbating factors why people get Alzheimer's disease or cognitive problems, in that the brain starts to develop the inability to use sugar or glucose as a fuel. So if in that case, because Americans typically don't live in ketosis or have periods of prolonged ketosis, they don't get enough energy to the brain simply by sugar alone. So the addition of exogenous ketones, BHB products, including our own from Keto 5, we see that this elevated level of blood ketones transfers to higher energy to the brain, and in areas of the brain that have hypometabolism, including areas like the hippocampus, which may be associated with emotional disorders or disorders of mood, these things are boosted up and really sort of act as an anti-anxiety agent. And you can do radio label studies. So wherever you have this area of hypometabolism or decreased function gives rise to the specific disease. So in the area, if that is occurring in the substantia nigra, you get Parkinson's disease. If you get it in the frontal lobe, it may be portend to memory problems. If you get it in the motor stripe, you can have things like tremor or weakness. So it depends on where the area, but because the neurons are all the same. We're all powered by electricity. And this electricity, in a home, it's 120 volts. You flip on the switch and you get a light. In the brain, it's minus 70 millivolts. And when you flip that switch, it propagates down just like the wiring in your own home.
So I think what I'm simplifying it for, others is these ketones really are helping you with prevent anxiety because your brain doesn't feel stressed to connect all of these parts that help you regulate and function, especially when it comes to your emotional triggers and wellness, to be able to manage that, and which leads into, physical capabilities and just the subconscious ways that your body acts and reacts.
That's exactly right, Bonnie. And to put it in the sort of way that someone can understand this is called recruitment. Okay, remember when you may see your friend walking down the street, your eyes see the individual. Then the picture gets sent to the back of the brain where it gets into the library and it recognizes, oh yeah, that's my friend Homer Simpson. And then
Yeah.
it may come to the front and it says, I want to say hi to him and shake his hands. So all of these electrical combinations and routing of signals is all powered by sugar and ketones. So if you have a reduction in the ability to use sugar, or there's insulin resistance, or there's inflammation, then these signals get jumbled, and you may recognize a parking meter as your friend, Homer Simpson, and walk up and start talking to the parking meter, which is what diseases like Tourette's syndrome is, okay, or the inability to find words, or the inability to control your mouth. This is an entire electrical system. It's just like your house. You've got electricity running in your house. It powers the water heater, the air conditioning, your oven, your refrigerator. And if it doesn't get delivered 120 volts, then you have food thawing, or you don't get the refrigerator working, or you can't wash your clothes, or your lights flicker. And this is a very important concept to understand, that we are an entire electrical system and a computer. And we do analysis, we do all these things, and your body does these if then scenarios. And if you can't crosstalk and make a unifying signal across, which is called recruitment, and recruitment of various areas of the brain, cross-talking and integrating, then you get problems of cognition, problems of emotion, problems of muscular function, problems of vision, hearing, and everything else. You're one giant electrical circuit.
What have you seen in your experiences where people may have been on caffeine for so long? Do you find that these ketones can help in healing that, or um, what's been your experience?
So, caffeine tolerance, also known as tachyphylaxis, is not uncommon. So you'll find people drinking, starting out drinking 1 cup of coffee. Next thing you know, a year later, they're drinking 5 cups of coffee. But on the other hand, I want to say that in published studies looking at the amount of caffeine in a cup of coffee is highly variable. It can be 25 milligrams to like 300 milligrams, and that's
Right.
a tenfold difference. So 1 cup of coffee may give you one kind of level of improved stimulation, and another might be so high across that individual you might get nauseated. So uh, it's very different in terms of each individual's response to caffeine, how much you're giving, uh, and this has been studied and been a subject of much controversy over many decades of investigation.
Do you
Okay.
feel like the different forms that come out where they say it's from green tea, it's from, whatever, do you feel like that makes a difference in it being better for you, or really does it
Well,
affect you all the same?
I think that's a very interesting question to try and answer.
Yeah.
But the issue is that every caffeinated product, okay, has other things in them. Some energy drinks contain guanarine or guanar, I mean, Some other green tea may have other neurostimulatory compounds like the methylxanthine or paraxanthine or some of these other medicinal-like compounds, even though they're in small amounts in the tea. Nonetheless, they can work together or they might work against each other. I think that's very a novel question to ask, for which the answer, I think, is very complicated and sort of beyond the scope of this discussion. But
Yes.
in reality, can caffeine addiction be ameliorated or helped out by the administration of exogenous ketones? I think the answer is yes, because when the neuron starts to fatigue from too much caffeine, or there's a sensation of withdrawal, that is, there's not enough caffeine in the system, the provision of real energy in the form of BHB salts or other ketone bodies will probably aid the recovery and the performance of the neuron by a pure energetic matter, as opposed to trying to fix the neurotransmitter level.
Thank you so much for touching on this topic with me and just putting out more awareness about really how, keto 5 and exogenous ketones and all of these different delivery type systems can really be an empowerment source for people to have real cellular energy all day long and to really support and help your brain function at its optimal performance.
Yes. I think you are making some very clear points. And that's not to say, by the way, one other thing is that's not to say that small amounts of caffeine would be useful in conjunction with ketone salts. And not only getting electrolyte support, but you're also getting a little bit of caffeine, because there's no doubt there are a medicinal value to caffeine.
Yes.
And so I think that these are circumstances that need to be worked out. It's areas of intense interest and exploration. And certainly our company, Keto 5, is endeavored to look at these sorts of combinations.
Well, I think you said it perfectly, right? It's finding it's a balance. And in our society where everything is done in overconsumption, it's either one or all, meaning like people don't know how to take things and they become addicted, just like, sugar and the things that it stimulates neurologically, putting us in a position to where we now become dependent on these substances, and it affects us long term. I mean, if I feel like taking something could create inflammation in my brain because my brain is so stressed out, it's not getting truly what it needs, long term, how is that not contributing, to these brain diseases?
Yes, absolutely. I think these are questions that are because our technology is improved, certainly trying to answer, and we are arriving at levels of knowledge that were far exceed what we knew about caffeine 100 years ago, or even ketones 100 years ago. So certainly.
Well, yeah, no, this is a great conversation. You guys click and follow, and we'll leave the website link below for Keto 5, and of course where you can find BHB Labs and where the ingredient and all of the information, so you can keep being enlightened by these conversations and continue to make the best choices to empower your body and your brain.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please share it and help us keep the conversation going. We can't grow without you. So, thank you in advance for your support of Power of Perseverance.